Hello and welcome to this episode of Marketed Not Live, the podcast for marketers who are looking to their own community to find out what's working now and, importantly, what's around the corner. In every episode, we'll bring to you a guest to talk about a specific marketing topic that will help you broaden your horizons. So if you're into social media, you can learn about all things SEO or branding, customer experience, stuff like that, just by listening to your peers. We'll have the speakers from last year's event and this year's Marketed Live, which of course takes place on Tuesday the 25th of September 2018 at the wonderful Nottingham Contemporary. And we'll also have you with us, our wonderful community of attendees and wannabe attendees, because, well, your experience is just as valid as anyone else's. If you'd like to be on the podcast, and why wouldn't you, then just drop us a line at hey@marketed.live. This show is sponsored by Podcast Websites, the industry-leading platform for creating a world-class audio marketing channel for yourself or your clients. Now, audio marketing really is engagement heavy, loads of engagement, and according to Edison research, over 75% of people who listen to podcasts take action based on the host simply asking them to do something. The team at Podcast Websites are helping us to bring this podcast to life, so a huge thanks to them for making this happen. If you're thinking about starting a podcast for you or maybe for your clients, then do check out podcastwebsites.com and see what they have to offer. Right now, listeners to this podcast and Marketed Live ticket holders can get 25% off all memberships for life until the 31st of October 2018, so go there now. Right, let's get on with the show. So today's episode, we have a very dear friend of mine, Tim Elliott. Hello, Tim.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
On the sofa. Not that you can see it if you listen to the podcast. So, first of all, tell me a little bit about who you are, what you do, and that sort of thing.
So, my name's Tim Elliott. I'm at Tim Elliott UK on all the socials. You can pick from there. I run a company called FYI that's focused on customer journey design and marketing strategy for high growth companies. I've been a marketer for donkey's years, like 21 years.
You're old.
I am old. And I do some fun stuff like guest lecture at universities for master's students teaching marketing strategy for entrepreneurial firms, and I do a bit of startup mentoring for Virgin Group and Faster Capital to help people get off on the right foot marketing wise, and that's about it.
Interesting.
Thanks.
You've got lots of fingers in lots of different pies.
I've got 10 fingers, so I try to use them all.
What sort of how did you get to doing what you're doing now then? So give us a little bit more of history in terms of in those 20 years, because I can say you're old because I'm actually slightly older than you.
Yeah, slightly. Same ballpark.
Yeah. How did you get from starting out your career in marketing to really going into these places now that are high-end clients that are selling high-ticket products or delivering services and then going into like lecturing as well?
It's been quite interesting, actually. So I've always been a marketer or in marketing roles, right from the days before kind of the internet, when I worked for a thing called Renaissance, which was a nightclub and a record label for progressive house music. You should check them out. They're awesome.
Good times.
They were good times. And I was PR team leader, which pretty much involved flyering.
Mm-hmm. That's marketing.
Yep. And running a VIP lounge, which was awesome. So that was the first foray into kind of customer-centric stuff and involvement and that sort of thing. From there, when they moved off, I went into brands and agencies as marketing managers and spent a good 5 years at a local web design agency in Nottingham, which is where I really got into the kind of digital side. So they weren't, they were a normal website company, nothing major, between 500 and 1,500 quid websites, but everybody was getting them at those times. We were selling between 20 and 25 new sites a week because it was that tipping point where people were coming from yellow pages, ask your mum and dad, into website world. right? So they were just dead simple versions of who you are, what you did, and how to get hold of your website. And I worked there for, I don't know, about 4 years or something. And then really started getting into social media, which wasn't in their roadmap, and communications and what you should do with a website once you've got it. And it wasn't in their roadmap to do that sort of thing. So I took the plunge to go self-employed as a freelancer, is where most people start, right?
Yeah.
A freelancer doing social media strategy and everything. Thought I could do everything, like telesales, lead generation, SEO, web design. Quickly found out can't do any of this stuff well and filtered it all out until I focused on social media stuff generally, and the communication side and the strategy and the training and that sort of thing, which took us to kind of 2012-ish, where we started a niche agency, but in that space, called Feed, with my current business partner, actually. And it was looking at student engagement for colleges. Right,
Okay.
so we were running Snapchat and Instagram campaigns and Twitter campaigns on social media to acquire new students for colleges who only marketed through prospectuses at that time, which we all know is for parents, right?
Yeah.
And that went really well. And we did that for a couple of years, and then kind of got taken over by one of the big agencies in the space who had people and capacity to do it, and we didn't. And dealing with colleges was a terrible client because they take half a year to decide anything. So we were quite glad that it moved on. But we learned a lot in that space in terms of growing a community and engagement and the stuff that goes on now, like telling a story, in stories and stuff like that. And ever since that, I've been in the consultancy world, really, and using strategies to help people just get the right foundations in which to grow a business from marketing.
And in terms of storytelling, I think what's quite interesting is when you were talking about dealing with colleges and the difference between the perspectives, which, as you say, is for the parents, and how you talk to a different audience, which is the student, because the student really is the decision maker there in terms of, I want to go here.
Yep.
How did you differentiate the content between, say, what was in a prospectus, these are the facilities, your child's going to eat well, and this is the library, to this is going to be a great university, you're going to get smashed every weekend, or this is the bar and the union and all the rest of it. How do you differentiate the audiences and the content for that?
Well, it was user-generated content, generally, right? So we did student stories. We did fan art of the teachers, of their favourite teachers. So they got them to draw pictures on the wall and go around and film it in situ, so in the foyer and reception. But we got their perspectives of it, because these organisations had spent tens of thousands of quid trying to give these kids a good start, and then expect them to read 400-page prospectus, and to get that.
It's boring, right?
Yeah, it's not speaking to your audience. It's not congruent with what they wanted. So it was all mobile stuff, right? So it was mobile where they lived. It was on that screen first. It was all user-generated content. It was even got to film like really short snippet. There was an app called Vine back then.
Yeah.
back in the day. That we did a one question and one answer thing with the professors, with student teachers and faculty and people like that. Just going, okay, why should people come to your course? Like one sentence answers really quick. And it went really well. And then it was always due to populate an end goal, right? So it wasn't just for fun, just for awareness and stuff. A lot of these things were to drive traffic to an open day.
Right, so there was an objective with all
100%.
of that content, even though it was quite, I don't know, what's the word? I can't remember, but like in the moment type of stuff.
It was all, I mean, the opposite of any marketing they did before. But they still needed to get people to come to an open day to sign them up and have the conversation about what do you want to do with a career, why do you want to take this course, what qualifications have you got, all the stuff that you do need to get to that point. but in a fun way. And then that experience, very much like our mutual friend Vicky Taylor does now, that day was also captured digitally.
Right, the open day.
Yeah. Or the open day, or the event, or some was for the opening of like an engineering school, for example, and looking at kids getting into STEM and stuff like that, all that sort of good stuff. But there was always a point which got the kids to interact with the people they needed to in the organisation.
So that feels very much like multiple touch points with the audience and the supplier, or the supplier of the service or the product or whatever. And if you're recording the open day, or you're creating content of the open day, and you couldn't make it to that open day, then I suppose that's bringing the experience then to the audience.
Exactly that. And that was the kind of foundation for the customer journey stuff as we frame it now, right? Because we always think that the message is the important thing. The format of the message, so whether it's delivered in Snapchat or in an email or a video or podcast or whatever, it is related to the end goal, right? To how the people on the other end want to consume it. But the message is important. So it's having that message available in multiple formats, which you can do after, if you film stuff, you can get transcribed and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure you guys know. But getting it and then using that, repurposing that content, much as we do nowadays, for social content to raise awareness for people who weren't there, to email people, because it's in school holidays, so some kids are on holiday. Right. So emailing them, sending them letters, having a look at our great fun day, because it's a great kind of welcome for the colleges. And we did it for, I don't know, about 30 odd colleges in the end around the country, which was but
so
really
it's like
good.
A format there that you could
it went
take
really
the work.
well, yeah.
What's interesting is we're speaking now from the Loughborough University campus, and what you have just described really feels like what I see on Loughborough University's Snapchat or Instagram in terms of bringing that experience to them. There's often chats with the Vice Chancellor, that sort of thing. So, I mean, I think you're a bit of a trailblazer.
A bit of a trailblazer. I mean, always have been on that.
How are you translating that then, and that experience, into what you do now, into going into corporates where perhaps the audience is not students? Are you that framework that you just spoke about? Tell us a bit more about that and how that applies to large clients.
Okay, so I think marketing in general is easily complicated, especially by businesses and even some marketers, because there's so much stuff you could possibly do. Right, look at Instagram, for example. How many formats of different things can you go on Instagram? Right, Jesus. And Facebook, right? It's really hard. It's really easy to overcomplicate it. So we always like working in a really simple staged process, right? So we knew that no matter what business you're dealing with, whether it's corporates, whether it's colleges, right? You have to raise awareness of people. There's some kind of middle bit where you have to convert. People are familiar with you, and then go into some kind of conversion or decision point. And then there's some kind of purchase, a sign up, a subscription. And then after that, right? And most businesses have something similar to that sort of stuff. And that's kind of where we are now. And that's called the customer journey, right? Where every touch point that people have from awareness to the end of their lifespan as a customer is called the customer journey. And what content, what message, what people are involved at what time in that journey. Because it stems back to the first marketing lesson I ever learned from my very first boss at that website agency, right? You got to get the right message to the right people at the right time. And that was 21 years ago, and he was old then. And it's not really changed.
It's not changed.
Right? It's just the technology we use to do it, the format of the message we use to do it has changed massively. And it will continue to change. It'll probably change quicker. We'll get rid of screens. There'll be loads of voice stuff. There's chatbots that you do. The way of getting that message to the people is the thing that changes all the time, but not the need for doing it. But you have to have a map now, I think, and a framework of enabling you to get the right message to the right people at the right time. And that's kind of what we do for businesses, because they get stuck with that, or they don't understand the context that their customers living in, being kind of customer centric rather than product and service centric.
So where you would do something like that, you're right, things don't change, but perhaps I'm wondering whether some of the things that actually change are how people as a society react to certain types of message. Okay, formats might change, and that's kind of an easy one, I think, to say, well, look, more people are using Instagram, so let's use Instagram, or more people are using voice, so let's use voice. Yeah. But what about how people change from almost like a psychological perspective? Do we need to be softer in terms of that messaging? How can that framework adapt to changes like that?
I mean, it's all customer centric, right? So it's all dependent on your customer's behaviour, really, and you try and serve them. You try and be a utility to those at that time. So it's all governed by what the customer wants. There's a really good framework called design thinking, which starts off with a thing called empathy, which is pretty much listening to your customers, giving them what they want. Seth Godin's banged on about it for as long as Seth Godin's banged on about it. It's not a new philosophy, but it is a new mindset for businesses. So if we as marketers can help our clients as businesses see from a customer's point of view, that's a thing that marketers are particularly good at, because our natural aptitude is we're people centric, right? We get on with people, we understand behaviour, we can think creatively and in real time on the spot in order to not manipulate that behaviour, but change it or alter or affect it in some kind of way. And that's what non-marketers need marketers for, that kind of level of thinking. And all we've done is try and put that in a framework that will be software that's printed that people can understand, like a visual framework, really.
And so in terms of, say, a marketer or someone who needs to have more connection with a customer, are there any tips or things that people should think about if they want to perhaps invest some more time in listening to potential customers or clients? What do they need to do?
I mean, the starting place is, and where it all comes from, is having a kind of a buyer persona or segmenting properly, right? Because there's still businesses that I come across that think B2B and B2C is a segment, or guys in Nottingham over 40 is a segment, and it's just not good enough to think at that level anymore. Because all the social stuff that we have around us, right? Or we put ourselves out there as people, and it's kind of driven by emotions and behaviours and that sort of thing. There's a really good graphic that I will give you a link to, you can stick in the show notes and stuff, called The Pillars of Segmentation. And it gives you the 4 areas of what you should think about when you're segmenting or building a buyer persona, for example, right? And that's like traditional demographics, like gender, location, etc., and firmographics like jobs and job roles and family status, that sort of stuff. And that sort of stuff might be affected by GDPR and that sort of stuff, or we might not be able to store that data or be able to market to it. So that brings in the other side, which is behavioural and psychographics, and where they are in the buyer journey. What kind of preferences do they have? Do they like attitudes and stuff like that, which is a lot more personable, a lot more human-centred. Are these all
assumptions that we would need to make about people, or how would we find out, for example, that our target audience or our ideal audience is more emotional, or not necessarily likes to shop at Waitrose, but maybe feels empathy towards refugees or something like that? How do we find that sort of stuff out?
I mean, it's represented in behaviour. So there's 2 exercises we do with people to get to that point, right? So one is to make an ideal client. right? Because everybody knows their ideal client, pay on time, live in this location, has this much budget, etc.
Are we writing this down, or is this in the?
Yeah, you write it
This
down.
is like okay.
Just map it out in your notebook or whatever. Do it yourself. Map out your ideal client. Perfect in every way. The more information in it, the better, right? And then you can take that information, you can format it into your ideal client persona, and that will act as a guide when you recognise behaviours in your audience, in your new customers and stuff like that. And you'll be able to go, okay, well, our ideal client is interested in saving the planet. So, you know, if we're interested in saving the planet or have empathy with saving the planet, then that will do that. And then if people, you know, that will help us engage in that perspective. That will be a tick in the right box. There's that exercise, which is really good to do. And also asking your existing clients. You don't need to ask many, like 5, 20, depending how big you are.
Do people do enough of that, do you think?
No. Nobody asks.
People just make assumptions based on what they think is happening.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you ask the end user, the customer, we're thinking of doing this, what do you reckon? They will tell you. They have no reason not to tell you unless you've already provided a bad experience. But you pick people who you haven't.
Who you've got a relationship with. Okay.
Who you've got a relationship with. But that's better learning than anything. You know, what sort of stuff drives you? Why did you buy this thing? What has it done for you?
And I think people like to be asked, don't they? If you go to somebody and say, actually, you're a valued client of ours and we'd like your feedback, or we'd like to understand what you think about this, or should we do this? Yeah. It's kind of like they're invested in the development of your service or product, so that they would buy into it more.
Yeah. I think it's a Dale Carnegie quote, who's one of the most famous salespeople ever. But he says you can win more friends and influence people by being more interested in other people than trying to make them interested in you. And that's kind of again that reverse, that flip thing.
See, that's basic relationship building, right?
Basic relationship building, but it's not.
We forget it, or people forget it. You don't forget it. You're an expert.
People forget it. I mean, a lot of my work, I listen to it, but it's just getting them to stop doing some stuff that they're already doing and go, well, why are you doing that?
Bad habits.
Yeah, and they go, not really sure.
Because they haven't thought about why they do it. And I think what you're saying is that the process that you go through with your clients is that you help them understand why they're doing things a certain way, to almost give them that realization that there is an alternative which is better. Yeah.
So it's to give them a visual representation of their customer journey. Because what they think their customer journey is probably not it. They think customers come, they ring the phone, they sell them a thing. That's not the way. That's not the way it happens. You know, there's multiple touch points, and most of the decision-making journey is done without a human interaction now. So not to have that map, or at least be aware of it. Never mind, we'll never be in control of it to 100%, but be aware of that happening and design that process so it has the optimal chance of ending in a sale. You know, is something that's really important, and that's kind of all customer journey design, marketing strategy. Call it whatever label you want to call it, but it's thinking about the customer first and trying to design the whole experience from awareness to after sale, to make them happiest, I suppose.
All right, so you've touched on a couple of things relating to the future, and the theme of this year's MarketEd Live is about the future and getting ahead of where we need to be. So you mentioned things like voice, and you just mentioned, you know, almost like a lack of human interaction sometimes in that buying process. How do we look towards the future then, and think about how that might change, or what we might need to do as marketers to still keep on top of that customer journey when we may have no interaction other than a digital footprint?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of really cool tools that are coming out that I've started using a lot. There's things called business intelligence dashboards, which give you a one-page view of every thing you're measuring within your ecosystem, within your customer journey. So there's spokes, 9 spokes, I think.
9 spokes.
Grow.com is an upper end of that sort of thing. But they're really usable examples of what a business intelligence dashboard is. So, for example, you would have a KPI from your email marketing team in that dashboard going, okay, I only want to measure how many people open it, right? And that will be on there. And you can grow these dashboards or design these dashboards that will give you a visual picture of where that's going. I think that's really important because the touch points we can put out there, we have to keep an eye on. You know, we have to keep an eye on all the social metrics, on the video views and watches, you know, on the podcast downloads, all that sort of stuff, to get a picture that our customers are moving in the right direction, are being guided by what we want to do there. I think that's super important. And I think there's another a really interesting phrase that's coming up in marketing and sometimes in the lectures that I give, actually, where personalization is becoming a bit old hat, and personification is becoming the thing. Right, so personalization is putting your first name in an email,
right,
you know, and doing